There is a lamp that keeps its low glow even when the world goes soft and wet. It sits near a seam of shade and light, throwing a yellowing circle over damp stone, over a small kettle that has stopped its sighing. Imagine that quiet for a moment. The lamp, the faint metal breath of the kettle, the hush of an evening where people have finished their errands and the neighborhood holds its breath like a hand cupped around a small light. This is the sort of hush that invites careful things, mending, folding, the slow untying of knots. If you like, ease yourself into that hush now. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders drop. Allow your feet to find their place. You do not need to hurry. There is no hurry here. Picture the lamp's glow softening the edges of the room. Let that light move through you like a kindly presence, slow and steady. The lamp keeps its low glow, and beyond that domestic hush, through a seam that is also a door and not a door, there is an ocean. It is not an ocean of water in quite the way we are used to. It is an ocean of being, an expanse so deep and slow that whole ages fold like textiles upon its surface. On that ocean rests a sleeper, Vishnu, laid out long and sure upon the coils of Ananta, the endless serpent. Think of Ananta as a long, patient couch, scales like overlapping tiles, a back that curves and supports a world upon its length. There is a lamp at Vishnu's side, too, an inner luminescence that never gutters, and nearby a sand glass whose granules fall with the calm of seasons. This is a sleep that is not empty. It is full of small crafts. It is work of a quiet kind, the kind that sews up torn cloth, that irons out a stubborn crease in a favorite coat, that mends a cracked teacup so it can be used again. In the dreaming, these small acts are the making and tending of what is. The dream is a slow workshop where stitches become stars and folded paper becomes a galaxy. The lamp keeps its low glow. If this kind of evening suits you, a gentle like or a bookmark helps bring more nights like this into reach. The sleeper breathes. Not a shallow thing, but a large, patient tide. Each exhale is a small, warm cloud, a kettle's sigh magnified until it becomes nebular. Each inhale is a gathering of hush, pulling in the world, smoothing it with breath. Around Vishnu move those who keep the quiet. Attendants who are more like friends, gentle demigods with hands used to threads and bowls. Sages who speak in examples rather than doctrine. A bird like Garuda who comes and goes with parcels and stories. There is Lakshmi present, not as a figure to be explained, but as a companion in the room. A presence at the shoulder, a hand that passes a spool or lays a patch. They do not rush, they prepare. Imagine a small awning over a shop, a tarpaulin faded at the edges, stitched and restitched over years. In the dream, this awning is the sky. The crew of dreamers notice a seam that needs attention, a thin, puckered line where the sky has been worn by winds of forgetting. Someone fetches a needle as you might fetch a particular spoon. They thread it with a bright cord that gleams like comet light. The cord is soft and has colors when it turns. At one end it is midnight blue. In the middle, a green that is like first rain on leaves. At the other, it brightens into a coppery dawn. The mender lifts the needle and makes a careful stitch. Each stitch draws the fabric of night together. When the thread catches, a small bell is nearer than you can see. A bell made of cooled starlight that rings in the throat of the seam. You can almost hear it as a delicate clink, the sort of sound that lives between two house keys. The attendants, with nimble fingers and gentle faces, pass measures of thread and whisper small practical jokes to keep the hands steady. A demigod, whose beard has been singed at the ends by previous constellations, laughs, a low sound like rolling bread dough. He tells an old joke about moons that refuse to line up. The others smile and offer him a strip of cloth to mend his sleeve. The sewing is not only mending, but patterning. Where the thread runs, stars settle like beads on lace. Where a particular knot is pulled, a band of planets forms. Brass studs that will later hold the ring of a solar system. The menders work slowly, their motions repetitive and sure, and as they do, the sky becomes less a single, uninterrupted sheet and more a garment being lovingly repaired and altered. The lamp keeps its low glow. If you would like, breathe with that movement now. Take a breath in as the needle lifts, small and attentive. Let the breath out as the stitch pulls the fabric close, long and so gentle it might be mistaken for a sigh. Allow your breath to find the seam in you, the small place that would welcome a tightening and a mending. Feel the steady tug of attention, the circulation of quiet. There are paper windows in the dream too. Nothing stiff or brittle but panes of thin, fragile stuff that hold light. Imagine paper lanterns in a row, each one a different tint. A green folding like new leaf, a dusky rose like the inside of a shell, a pale blue like a child's thumbprint on clean paper. The attendants take these panes and hang them upon a line stretched across the sky. As they hang each pane, the paper unfurls and becomes a lotus. The crease lines bloom into petals. The paper's fibers catch the light and hold it. A single paper window hung in a cool place becomes a small world. A morning for a village, a secret harbor, the memory of a tune. One attendant passes a latticework of paper after another, fingers careful as someone handling a newborn. He says quietly to whoever is near that some windows must be mended with old prayers and some with new songs. No words need to be exact. They speak in the language of attention. The paper windows, when hung, drift and catch light and slowly swell into galaxies. Pale circles threaded with a memory of blue, spirals that are gentle as a thread spool unwinding. The lamp keeps its low glow. Imagine now a sand glass, not the small one you might have on a mantel, but a tall, elegant thing whose fall is measured in ages. In the dream it stands upright on a small table of driftwood. The sand within is fine as pollen and glows faintly. Some grains are silver, some golden, some near black. When you watch the sand, you do not count. You allow the sense of time to settle like silt. If you like, place the sand glass within your chest where the rhythm of days can be felt. Notice the slow, patient slide of granules. Feel them as a gentle pressure behind the ribs, a measured unfolding that is not hurried. There is a cracked pane in the dream, a shard of something that was once clear and whole, but now bears a hairline fracture like the memory of an old hurt. Someone brings it to the low table where repair is to be done. There is a ritual here, not solemn but tender. The piece is cleaned with water that smells of hyacinth and lemon peel. A fine brush removes dust. Then, with hands trained in gentle pressure, the attendants apply a seam of gold thread to the cracked edge. The gold is not blinding. It is the warm metal of a spoon held in the sun. They do not try to hide the crack. Instead, they stitch through it, drawing it into the design. In doing so, they give the pane a new beauty. The fracture becomes a river in a landscape rather than an injury. As they work, someone tells a story. Once, a small town thought itself too marred to keep. A woman there gathered the broken cups and the frayed cloth, and instead of casting them away, She mended them with a thread from her own shawl. People came to drink from the cups, and they said the tea tasted like remembrance. The attendants in the dream smile at that and pass the story along the line. Stories here are like a patching stitch. They hold places together. The lamp keeps its low glow. If you like, let your breathing follow the rhythm of that taking and mending. Draw the breath in, small and careful, like a brush smoothing a grain of dust. Release the breath as the thread pulls, soft and content. Imagine your chest as a pane being tended. The crack becomes an element of pattern, a river that is lit. There is a kettle in the dream, too, larger than the one at your hob, but not so large it means anything grand. Rather, it is the scale of comfort enlarged. When the kettle breathes, the mist coming from its spout is a nebula. The attendants pass cups and pour tiny clouds into them. Each sip is a memory, warm and ordinary. Sometimes when the kettle sings, it is because a new star is being coaxed into shape. Sometimes it is because someone has just told a joke about lost spectacles, and the sound bubbles up in the throat of the universe as a small, pleased whistle. Lakshmi moves among these moments with the ease of someone putting a patch on a favorite coat. She lays out a small loaf, bread warm from the dream oven, and the attendants break it with reverence, handing pieces around. This sharing is quiet and practical. There is no pomp, only the steady comfort of food and talk. In their mouths, the bread crumbles like tiny constellations, and then the crumbs are gathered to feed the corners that tend toward emptiness. There is a pattern to the communal craft that repeats fetch, mend, tell, laugh, pass the kettle, sit. Each cycle is a small knot in a longer rope. People and beings pass the tools, a thimble that is a moon, a spool that is a small planet, needles that carry comet tails. A bird brings a ribbon and drops it across a shoulder. A sage comes with a cloth to wipe the dust of old times from a brow. They are not cleaning to erase history, but to make it readable. In one small episode, a young attendant, whose hands still tremble from newness, presents a star that has lost its shine. Her fingers are careful. She arranges it in a nest of lint and oils it with something like lemon and rosemary. The older attendant watches and says only, "There's always more light in a tended thing." The young one smiles and says, "Then let us tend." They place the star back in the sky with a gentle push. A breeze moves through the coils of Ananta, and the star begins to pulse again, shyly at first, then with a steady beat, like someone who has learned to walk. There is humor here, but it is soft and human. Once they tied a small moon to a string to keep it from wandering, and it preferred to swing. They had to let it be. The universe is not without personality. The lamp keeps its low glow. If you like, let your hands rest where they are now and notice the smallness of them. Imagine the attendant's hands and feel a kinship across the expanse of dream. Breathe in as a spoon lifts to pour. Breathe out as the spoon settles back into the bowl. Allow a small smile to happen if it wants to. You may, if it helps, picture the palm of your hand as a little warm loaf, something easy to hold and pass. There are songs too, not the kind that demand attention, but those that knit rhythm into work. A low hum threads through the dream as someone polishes a brass stud into a planet. The tune is simple, repeating a small phrase like the hum a kettle makes when it is content to hold heat. Sometimes the chant is only 3 notes, and those 3 notes become a pattern across an entire galaxy. They do not force the world, they invite it. Now imagine a moment where Vishnu's dream becomes very small and domestic for a time. A scene that could have lived in a shop front by the lamplight. An attendant sits on a low stool and threads a needle for a child. The child's eyes are bright. The attendant teaches the child how to knot the thread. She says, "Begin where the tear is smallest. You will always know where to start." The child nods and begins. The act is ordinary. The world does not tremble. Only it grows fuller. The seam mends. A small star settles. The lamp keeps its low glow. There is a particular coin of time in the dream. A tiny ritual repeated. The placing of a thumb along a seam to feel its tension. The thumb knows the language of cloth. It presses gently, feeling forgive, for the place where the stitch must hold fast. 1,000 thumbs in 1,000 places, and the world is threaded into being as one would darn a favorite stocking. The tactile knowledge matters. The press, the patience, the measure between stitches. This is craft held as care. An elder among the attendants, someone who has been keeping the kettle hot for as long as the attendants can remember, tells a short story about an old tailor who mended a king's cloak so finely that the king wore it every day and forgot the weight of crown. The tailor only ever knew the next stitch, the elder says. He did not know the weight of crowns. The others laugh softly, and the laughter moves like warmth across bare knees. The lamp keeps its low glow. In the middle of such work, a fragile thing is discovered. A tiny planet that has been misplaced, tucked behind a fold of cosmic textile. It is no larger than a marble, and it trembles with a life that is its own. The attendants debate gently how best to care for it. One suggests a cradle of moss. Another suggests a small vessel to warm it. They decide instead to make a window for it, a paper pane, carefully tinted. They hang it on the line, and it is as if a little door opens for that planet to breathe. Its smallness is no curse. It is an argument for tenderness. The lamp keeps its low glow. There are small arguments, yes, over the rightness of a certain shade of gold, over whether a seam should be hidden or celebrated. But the arguments are never sharp. They are the counsel of friends who care how a thing looks when it is next invited to the table. In these little disagreements, the attendants learn from one another. They exchange tools and stories. One gives a spool to another with an aside. For the places that are difficult to reach, use patience. Another replies, "Patience we have in endless measure for good work." They return again and again to the same rhythm. From time to time, the sleeping mover makes a slight turn. It is imperceptible to outsiders, but it ripples the surrounding dream like a cat shifting in the night. When Vishnu turns, some lights dim, and others brighten as if reacting to the pressure of his presence. A lotus, previously folded tight, breathes open a little. The attendants take this as their cue to prepare for a change of scale. Stitches may become rivers. A mended pane might become the rim of a new morning. There is a hush that precedes such moments. The sand glass slows its fall as if to listen. The kettle's whistle becomes a held note. The lamp keeps its low glow, and in the hush, a visitor arrives, not in haste, but with the deliberate pace of one who has traveled to give a small gift. He carries something folded inside linen, a small book of patterns, pages soft with handling. He lays it on the low table and opens to a page where a design is drawn in careful ink, a spiral that can be made by joining many small, humble stitches. This, he says plainly, is for when the sky needs a seam that sings. The attendants lean in. They observe the diagram like craftsmen seeing a new cut in wood. You might notice how quietly splendid such a moment is. A single sketch, a collective intake of breath. There is no clatter of trumpets, only an attention that could be mistaken for courtesy. It is the sort of reverence that keeps the lamps from being pagan. It is respect rolled into action. The lamp keeps its low glow. If you like, place your attention now where you feel it most comfortable. Perhaps at the base of your throat, perhaps at your belly, perhaps at your lungs. Imagine the breath as a tool, like the needle or the spoon. Breathe in as the visitor opens his book. Breathe out as a page turns. Let each breath be a small, attentive movement. Notice how the world within you mirrors the world in the dream. There are seams, there are pains, there is the steady lamp. As the attendants study the pattern, there is a voice that asks for a hand to steady something. A small laugh. The elder reaches, and the younger one presses the thumb where the stitch will hold. It is community in motion. Shared knowledge, shared labor, and shared quiet. There is a warmth that travels through the group as if it were the passing of a bowl. At that moment, across the way, a fold in the fabric of night begins to fray in a manner different from the usual wear. It is not the slow wearing of years, but a sudden weakening like a seam that has been bitten by a winter moth. The attendants pause. They look to Vishnu, to the lamp, to the sand glass. The kettle's steam rises in a thin column that seems to point the way forward, and the bird that brings messages flutters nearer, ruffling its wings with news that needs no urgency, and yet asks for attention. They will need a new measure of thread for this, the elder says. The young one will need to go for it. He will cross an area of the ocean where the spray holds tiny lanterns. He will pass islands that are little stitched gardens, and he may acquire a ribbon that sings when pulled. A map will be consulted, drawn not with lines, but with smell and texture. Preparation is quiet but precise, and here, in the soft pressure of that project, the dream thickens. Something is about to be tried that the attendants have not attempted in quite this way. A kind of mending that will not only join edges, but will coax life into a new pattern. They are careful because craft is not merely technical, it is also moral. It asks, what do we allow to remain as it is, and what do we ease into newness? Vishnu's breath deepens, almost without waking. The lamp keeps its low glow. The sand glass tilts a hair's breadth. Hands are chosen for the next passage, some steady, some nimble, some given to song. They ready the threads. They fold the paper windows into small bundles and tuck the kettle's steam into jars that will later be opened like presents. This is a threshold. The dream is lined up for something larger, a stitch that may change the arrangement of certain lights. The attendants look to one another, and for a moment everyone remembers a small thing that grounds them. An old song, a joke about a moon and a mislaid shoelace, the smell of warm bread on a morning that has long since passed. You may feel, as the intensity gathers, a slight tightening in the chest. Not distress, but the alertness that precedes careful work. Allow it to be as it is. Breathe with it. Breathe in as the attendants ready the thread. Breathe out as the kettle's breath fills the cups. The lamp keeps its low glow. Somewhere beyond, in the deeper coil of Ananta, a thought begins to form in Vishnu's sleep. An image that is both very small and very wide. A folded paper that might be unfolded into a new horizon. The attendants prepare to make the first incision of care, to draw a line with thread that will become a road, a constellation, a line of melody. And then, as hands move to take up the work, The bird from earlier returns with something tucked under its wing. A single petal, pale as a memory. It is cool and damp. It smells faintly of rain and was perhaps once part of a flower that grew on the edge of an island that no map remembers. The petal is held up and everyone leans in to see how it might be used. In its center, there is a faint crease like a fold holding a secret. They are about to test that crease to see if it will open into a new kind of light. The lamp keeps its low glow. They hold the petal between careful fingers, and it is as if the whole room leans nearer. It is thinner than paper, softer than vellum, edges feathering where it was plucked. The attendants pass it along a line like a small sacred thing. Someone touches the crease with a fingertip and says nothing. The fingertip alone seems to hum with curiosity. The elder nods, as if approving a decision made long ago but only now coming due. They decide to try the crease as a hinge. Nothing dramatic. No clumsy unfolding. No great tearing. The young attendant who carried the star is chosen. Her hands are steady now with practice. She lays the petal on a clean piece of cloth and draws a thread as thin as a breath through a needle. The thread is dyed with a color that does not sit in ordinary speech. A soft dusk that remembers light. The needle is passed, held up to the lamp to see the eye, and the stitch begins where the crease is faintest. As she stitches, the attendants do what attendants always do. They tell small things that draw attention away from anxiety and toward craft. The bird drops a scrap of song at their feet. A demigod hums an old tune under his breath. Lakshmi arranges a bowl of warm water and citrus peels to wash the oil from the tools. The young woman's thumb presses gently where the stitch holds. Pressure becomes language here. The petal yields like a page. The crease opens and inside there is the suggestion of morning. No great proclamation, only the pale wash of dawn that will, in time, become a place you could stand and breathe. The moment is not pronounced. It is simply felt. A new line of light threads through the petal and begins to stretch, like cloth being laid across a table. The attendants smile with the kind of quiet pleasure that belongs to people who have watched many small repairs turn out well. Someone says, "It will be a lane," and another replies, "Maybe a harbor." They argue playfully about whether this new opening should be a path or a bay, and the debate is as gentle as folding paper. If you like, imagine the crease within you opening in the same way. Breathe in gently as the needle passes through. Breathe out as the thread draws the edges into relation. Feel the soft give where you thought there was only fault. Your breath can be a small stitch, finding a beginning and a place to rest. As the petal opens, a width of sky becomes clearer, and along the newly revealed seam, a band of pale lantern light gathers. This band at first seems to have no weight. Then, with the slow kindness of a loaf cooling, it takes the shape of a low coastline. Boat of stitched reeds nestle there. A lamplight burns on the headland like a single sure eye. A child from an earlier vignette, old now in the dream's strange counting of time, picks up a shard of glass and, without fuss, uses it to make a lens. Through that lens, the attendants see the coastline more closely. It is populated with small, patient houses that look like they were made to be repaired, rather than to be abandoned. It is in the nature of this dream to magnify the small into the large, and the domestic into the cosmic without violence. A spoon becomes a crescent moon. A spare button becomes an orbit. The boats are no larger than cupped hands, and yet they carry, in miniature, the manner of a world. the careful arrangement of sails, the habit of boiling a kettle at evening, the ritual of mending nets. A man whose hands smell of sea salt sits and mends a net that will later be found to hold the laughter of a small village. The attendants take to this coastline with tools that are both familiar and slightly altered. A fan-shaped mender uses a comb like a rake to smooth the sand. Another draws small symbols in the grain that are less signs than invitations. An opening for a stranger to feel welcome. A place where grief may be set down for a moment while tea is shared. The lamp keeps its low glow. They discover a road, stitched from old cloth, that leads inland to a garden where lotuses are grown not for show but for keeping. Each lotus is tended like a small household. One attendant kneels and with the gentlest of motions lifts a single lotus to her face and breathes its scent. Hyacinth threaded with river mud and a memory of spice. Her mouth curves, and she says, "These will be the windows for the next morning." She hands a lotus to the elder, and he nods, whispering thanks to no one in particular. The elder then speaks of a practice that guides the work. We hold nothing so precious that we cannot mend it with our own two hands. He says it like someone speaking of measuring cloth, a practical truth, not a doctrine. The words go along the line like cotton thread. The assistants hum, and the hum gathers into a low chord that steadies the working hands. A small miracle of tenderness occurs. A child in the garden finds a nest of threadworms, tiny creatures that look like stray commas, and, rather than sweep them away, she coaxes them with crumbs. They coil around the thread, and, when later used, the thread carries a peculiar softness, a readiness to yield and then hold. The attendants call it breathing thread as a joke, and, because words matter in small communities, the name begins to stick. The lamp keeps its low glow. There is also a story told about a kettle that did not boil for 30 nights. People worried. They called it lazy. But one morning, an old seamstress placed a spoon in the kettle and hummed to it as she stirred. The kettle began to sigh, and then to sing, and eventually it boiled with a gentle, sure whistle. The attendants laugh softly at the memory because it tells them something steady. Things sometimes need company more than they need force. They pass the memory from hand to hand like a small talisman, and so the dream keeps leaning into the economy of care. Repair, ritual, and the friendliness of keeping. This economy is not transactional. It is a way of making sure things stay possible. A failing star is rethreaded. A torn poem is rewoven. A small village is given by way of mending. A new street lined with paper windows. The lamp keeps its low glow. If you like, take a breath now as if sipping from that kettle's cup. Draw air gently in and let it fill your chest like a quiet tide. Let it settle. Exhale slowly, as if sending steam across the surface of your hands. Allow the breath to be both small and vast at once. Beyond the garden there is a field of cloth. Lengths of fabric stretched on frames like sails. Each frame holds an image woven into it. One is the sound of reredo's bells. Another the taste of salt warmed with sugar. Another is a map of a coastline built from the stitching of many small hands. The attendants lay new cloth beside old cloth, and sometimes sand the edges so the joins are soft. A younger attendant asks why they labor so to smooth the margins. The elder replies, "Because the world prefers gentle borders. They make room for visitors. The frames are more than decoration. When a particular piece is mended in just the right way, a low harmonic tone resonates. It is not audible as a word, but as a sense that the place has been approved for habitation. A pavilion is then put up, and a little community moves in. People who have needed a place that acknowledges their smallness. The attendants teach them how to mend what they carry. The community, in turn, sings the simplest of choruses while kneading bread. The lamp keeps its low glow. There are moments of playfulness. In one instance, someone sews a pocket into the lining of the sky. Into that pocket they put a set of tiny keys. Keys that belong to doors no longer used. Later, those keys will be found by a wise fool who uses one to open a cupboard full of small objects that delight rather than astonish. A pebble that feels like a heart. A scrap of cloth that smells of shore. A button that quotes an old proverb when pressed. The fool laughs, and the laughter is a kind of currency here. It buys patience and mends irritable edges. It is in such small economies that the attendants show their craft. They understand that not every need requires a brilliant solution. Sometimes a pocket and a key and a bowl of tea will do. The lamp keeps its low glow. As their work continues, the dream brings forth a quieter, more attentive kind of visitor. A carpenter who fixes the chairs where the elders sit. He comes with planes and files and a map made of old boards. He chooses wood that has a knot the size of a thumb, and in that knot nests a tiny constellation. His hands are dark with sap, and the scent that follows him is of cedar and a rain-soaked market. He speaks little. His work is a kind of prayer that looks like sanding. When he finishes, a chair seems to remember the people who will sit in it. They sit more easily afterwards, and their conversations come with more space. There is a sequence where a mended chair hosts a council tenderly convened to decide how to repair a river that has started to run thin. A sage suggests building small dams that are more like questions than answers, little chicanes that slow the water and let fish find rest. Another suggests seeding the banks with hyacinths. They do both. The river thickens, not at once, but in a way that will live on the scale of seasons. The lamp keeps its low glow. At the heart of the work always is Vishnu's breath. It is present as a tide that shapes the attendant's tempo. When his breath draws closer, their hands move with less haste and more deliberation. When his exhale is soft, the world in the dream takes a gentle sway, like bedsheets smoothing across a mattress. His sleep is not an absence, but an active, attentive presence, a kind of slow attention that watches over the practice of mending. One night in the dream, a problem appears that tests the collective skill. A deep tear in a length of sky that runs like an old scar from horizon to horizon. It is wider than before, and seems reluctant to be eased into a simple seam. The attendants gather. They lay the cloth upon the sands and measure it with tools that are not only practical, but ritual. Rulers that remember previous stitches. Thimbles that hold the imprint of long use. An experienced mend and maker suggests they do not, for once, stitch straight across. Instead, they will make a border of small patches, each with a motif of its own. A moon here, a small boat there, a child's face stitched so lovingly that it becomes a minor constellation. This decision reveals a teaching held quietly in the dream. Complexity can be honored by particularity. Instead of hiding or smoothing over differences, they embrace them as pattern. Small, heterogeneous repairs become a tapestry that reads as invitation rather than cover. The lamp keeps its low glow. Work spreads into the night with the ease of long practice. The attendants take turns to rest. Those who are resting tell stories in hushed tones. One tale is of an orphan who, given a piece of bright cloth, turned it into a flag that the neighborhood raised every morning. The flag was not brilliant but steady, and it came to mean someone will be here to patch things. When the story finishes, the listeners sigh with a kind of contented exhaustion, a sense that what matters is the promise itself. The lamp keeps its low glow. There comes a moment when the measurements and the little patches have to be brought together. It is like joining the last pieces of a quilt. The elder brings the threads that have been collected, a blue that remembers rain, a copper for dawn, a slow black for the deep places. They stitch slowly, with many hands involved, and the patchwork comes to life. When the seam holds, a sound rises that is not only a noise but a quality, a resonance like the first low note of a choir tuning. The fabric of the sky acquires one more layer of story. At this juncture, something rare and beautiful happens. Vishnu's dream yields a blossom no one expected. A great lotus, cradled in a shallow bowl of his breath, opens its petals. It is not ostentatious. It unfolds as someone who has always known how to be considerate. Within its center there is not thunder, but a small figure seated with a calm like sun-warmed stone. Brahma, in the faintest of recognitions, perhaps, or a presence that wears the manner of beginning rather than the weight of finality. The attendants look and smile, because beginnings are a kind of service to them. More things to tend, more chances to practice gentleness. Light pours from the lotus not as a bright flare, but as a measured warmth, folding around the attendants like a scarf. Each petal lifts and reveals textures, maps, songs, names, and the scent of a kitchen in which bread is rising. The lotus bathes the repaired seam, and somewhere in that washing the seam smooths into an elegant line. The coastline becomes more certain. The boats find room. The little harbor nods into being. The lamp keeps its low glow. This is the apex the dream has been leaning toward. Creation as care, not conquest. The attendants do not step back to admire. They move forward to the small tasks that follow any birth. Binding, labeling, offering thanks by the proxy of a neat fold, or the arrangement of cups. They do not seek glory. They steady one another's hands and continue the slow economy of making possible. If you like, rest your attention on the place behind your breastbone where such warmth might live. Breath in as the lotus opens. Breathe out as the petals settle. Let the warmth spread like the lamp's glow across your shoulders and down your arms. Imagine its light as a small domestic kindness that knows where it is needed. Following the lotus, an attendant, older, whose hair is streaked with time, stands and tells of a place where people had thought that their world was too narrow. The attendant says the people there made a small window and through it looked at one another. The act of looking, he says, changed how they mended their lives. The story impresses the point that attention is a kind of craft, and that to look closely is to begin the work of repair. After the lotus's opening, the dream grows quieter in the way of a room settling after many guests have passed out. The attendants tuck away their tools in orderly fashion, needles sheathed, spools stacked like tiny planets, the kettle cooled and wrapped in cloth. Garuda takes a basket of messages and lifts like a bird leaving a warm porch. The elder pats the coiled back of Ananta in a friendly motion, and the serpent makes a sound like the rustle of dried leaves. And yet, even as they tidy, the dream hums with potential. A seam finished in one place produces a demand for care in another. The menders know this and are content. The workshop is not a place which reaches a single ending. It is a practice that renews in cycles. The lamp keeps its low glow. It is time now for a different kind of tending, to bring the dream's lesson into the listener's own limbs. The attendants arrange a simple ritual of affirmation. Nothing religious, only the passing of light. One by one they hold a small lamp near the chest of a newcomer to the dream and nod as if consenting to the brightness. They say, without solemnity, "May you find what keeps." The voices are low and human. They do not demand belief. You may imagine one such lamp held for you. If you like, place your hands where they rest most naturally and feel their weight. Breathe in slowly, as if drawing the lamp's light into your heart. Breathe out as if the breath were a friendly cloth smoothing a fold. Allow the rhythm to be simple and unforced. There is no goal to measure here, other than to allow yourself to be present for a while in kindness. As the dream begins to wind, small acts of closure are performed. A basket of warm loaves is placed before those who might go without. A set of chairs is repaired and lined up as if to invite conversation tomorrow. A line of paper windows is strung across the sky, each a small promise of morning. The attendants slow their speech and match the tempo of the lamp. Vishnu's breath remains the steady tide. It is worth noticing how the dream never leaves him entirely. He is both dreamer and stage, apart and intimate. It is a curious balance. His sleep allows agency in others who are permitted to make. Creation here is not unilateral, but communal. There is a final small test in the night. A child whose hands are too cold to stitch properly. The child trembles, embarrassed. The elder takes the child's hands and warms them between his own like the passing of a small, practical blessing. He does not speak of destiny, he speaks of warmth. The child goes on to make a neat, honest stitch that, it turns out, holds the seam in a place where many had failed before. The lesson is simple and incontrovertible. Warmth helps hands hold steady. The lamp keeps its low glow. You may, if it feels right, allow your breathing now to follow the measured pattern of the sand glass. A sense of slow accumulation as you breathe in, and a settling as you breathe out. Let the breath be small and private, as if it were a thread you draw through the eye of a needle. Notice the rise and fall, the way your chest softens like cloth put away. As you settle, the attendants walk you back along the path they have made. They point out, without fanfare, the boats at harbor, the little garden, the lotuses that now face a new dawn, the seam newly mended and shining in its own modest way. They do not ask for praise. They seem content to have kept company with one another and with the work. There is an understanding here that you can carry beyond the dream, that mending is itself an offer to the world, not a removal of scars, but an invitation to live with them differently. You may think of a seam in your own life that has required patient handling, a relationship, a habit, a small sorrow. Imagine approaching it as the attendants do, with tools in hand, with a friend to steady your thumb, with a pot of tea waiting for repairs finished. The lamp keeps its low glow. When it is almost dawn in the dream, not a dawn for catastrophe or triumph, but the simple next morning when bread will be broken and someone will fold a shirt, Vishnu shifts slightly in his sleep. The movement ripples out, and the attendants take it as a cue to tidy and to lay the day's offerings in order. They fold the cloths with the same care they used in the night. Garuda lifts into the sky on easy wings, carrying with him the small parcels of gratitude and the messages to places where mending is not yet known. You may find that in your own room, as the audio winds towards its close, some gentle habit wants to be made. A cup put on the bedside, a lamp left with its low glow. You do not have to make any grand adjustments. A small action, repeated with kindness, is often the best kind. The attendants would agree. As the last threads of the dream gather, the elder approaches the lamp, sets it level with the listener's imagined heart, and offers a short, unadorned word of farewell in the language of care. Keep a small light. It is not a command nor a promise of rescue, merely an encouragement, practical and warm. If you like, take 3 slow breaths now, no hurry. Breathe in as if taking up a tiny thread. Breathe out as if laying it down. On each out-breath, feel more of your body rest into the surface that holds you. Allow the breath to be like the kettle's patient sigh, like the sand's slow fall, like the seam's gentle pull. The attendants begin to leave in the softest way, one by one, not with dramatic farewells, but with the quiet of people stepping out into morning chores. The lamp is passed to the last of them, who sets it by the seam and pats the fabric once. Vishnu's breath becomes broader, deeper. The ocean around him remembers its slow history and rocks itself in an ancient lullaby. Returning from the dream does not mean forgetting it. The mended seam is not meant to be shown off, but to be lived with. As you draw your breath into the room where you are now, imagine the lamp that keeps its low glow nestled somewhere in your evening. Let it be an emblem of attention, a small, steady light that remembers to repair rather than to break. When you are ready, allow your awareness to widen gently from the center of your chest to include the soles of your feet, the backs of your knees, the weight of your hands. There is no urgency. The pace is the same as it was in the dream, slow, attentive, courteous to the small things. A final thing the attendants do before they go is to knot a ribbon and place it upon the line of paper windows. It will flutter in a mild wind and remind anyone who looks up that some practice of care has been done tonight. You might picture that ribbon as an intention you keep, small, visible, and easily returned to. If you would like more nights like this, rooms where myth and care meet and small hands mend the large, you may quietly subscribe so these doors can be opened again. There is no demand, only an offer. When you are ready to sleep, let the lamp's modest light be the last thing you imagine. Let the sand glass keep its patient count. Let the kettle's memory warm your belly like a small internal hearth. Allow your breathing to lengthen and slow. Think of one simple stitch you might make tomorrow, literal or otherwise, and know that the act of tending is itself a kind of creation. May the small practices of tonight be enough, the cup left at your bedside, the lamp kept low, the thought of a seam tending to its own quiet repair. The lamp keeps its low glow. Rest now, and let the dream of repair be part of the soft landscape through which your sleep will move. The attendants will be nearby in the dream work, as they are in every careful story, ready to steady a thumb, hand over a spool, or offer a warm crust of bread. There is a long patience in the world if you care to touch it, and a neighborly hand will often be within reach. Good night. If this sort of evening has brought you ease, a quiet subscribe will help us bring other nights like this. Otherwise, sleep well under the lamp's low glow.